Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize how strong you really are. I didn't understand that line until the night my captain looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not built for this job, Sarah. You should have stayed behind the desk." That sentence cut deeper than any insult I'd ever heard on the streets of Dallas. It came from a man I once admired, Captain Rick Holden. The same man who used to pat my shoulder after long shifts and say, "You've got real guts, rookie." Now, after 6 years in uniform, after every double shift and every crime scene that still haunted my sleep, he wanted me gone. It started small, his tone changing, his comments turning sharp. I brushed it off as stress. But then came the day I reported an officer for falsifying an incident report. That officer happened to be one of Holden's drinking buddies. The next week, my schedule changed overnight. Graveyard shifts, random inspections, paperwork piled higher than my gun locker. When I walked into the precinct one morning, my locker was half open, my service record file missing. I looked at the empty slot and felt my stomach twist. That's when I knew this wasn't just hostility. It was sabotage. At home, the silence was heavier than my bulletproof vest. My small apartment in Oak Cliff smelled faintly of burnt coffee and exhaustion. I sat on the couch, staring at the thin blue folder in my lap, the one that held every commendation I'd ever earned. 6 years of proving myself, and one man's bruised ego could erase it overnight. The next day, I confronted him. Calmly, professionally. "Captain, someone's been tampering with my file. My schedule's changed without notice." "Maybe if you did your job right, your schedule wouldn't matter," he said without looking up from his desk. He smiled then, a slow, condescending smirk. "You think being a woman gives you a free pass? You're lucky I let you wear that badge." I stood there, heart hammering, staring at the same brass badge on his chest. For the first time, I didn't see a leader. I saw a coward hiding behind authority. I walked out before I said something that would cost me my career. But the moment the heavy door closed behind me, something shifted inside. I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to cry in my car again. I was going to fight back by the book. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, writing everything down: dates, times, comments, schedule changes, the missing file. I took photos, printed emails, and started a small folder labeled Holden. My hands trembled as I wrote, but my mind was clear for the first time in weeks. This wasn't about revenge. It was about respect, about not letting him make me invisible. I didn't know yet how far this fight would go, or what it would cost me, but I knew one thing. I'd stopped being afraid of him. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice that says, "I'll try again tomorrow." I repeated that line to myself every morning before walking into the precinct. Because now every hallway felt different, colder, sharper. Rumors started spreading. The kind that slither between locker doors and break room whispers. "Officer Daniels can't handle the pressure. She's filing complaints again, drama queen. She should have known better than to go against Holden." I heard every word. Sometimes they'd stop talking the moment I entered. Sometimes they didn't bother. I'd walk to my locker, open it, and find small reminders that I wasn't welcome. A coffee cup knocked over onto my spare uniform, a ripped photo of my old academy class. But I said nothing. I documented everything. I bought a small flash drive from a corner store near Lemon Avenue. I kept it taped under my car's dashboard, away from prying eyes. Every night, I backed up my reports, my emails, even screenshots of internal messages that mysteriously disappeared the next day. It wasn't easy keeping my composure. I'd sit across from Holden in staff briefings, watching him act like a hero, talking about integrity, about duty. Every time he said those words, my chest burned. Then came the day he crossed the line. It was a humid Thursday, late shift. I was finishing paperwork when he walked in, leaning against my desk. His voice dropped low, oily. "You really think internal affairs will take your side? You're a pretty face, Daniels, not a crusader." He said it loud enough for 2 other officers to hear. They looked away, one embarrassed, one amused. I froze. My pulse thundered in my ears. "Excuse me, Captain?" I managed. "Relax," he said with that smug smile. "Just saying, don't make waves you can't swim through." He tapped my desk twice, left his fingerprints smudged on my file, and walked out. That night, I went home shaking. Not from fear, from fury. I called an old friend, Jenna. She'd left the force 2 years ago after a harassment case that quietly went away. I hadn't seen her since. We met at a diner off I-35. She looked older, wiser, but her eyes softened when she saw me. "He's targeting you, isn't he?" she said before I could even order coffee. Yes, I whispered. And I'm done pretending it's just stress. She slid a card across the table. Detective Lisa Moore, Internal Affairs, Dallas PD. She's good, Jenna said. But you need evidence. Solid, time-stamped, traceable. Don't just survive this, Sarah. End it. That night, as I drove home, the city lights blurred against my windshield. The fear that used to choke me felt smaller now, like a shadow I could finally see through. I wasn't a rookie anymore. And if Holden thought he could use his badge as a weapon, I was about to remind him what justice actually looked like. At 1:13 a.m., I created a new document on my laptop. Title: Complaint Draft, Formal Submission. Underneath, I wrote the first sentence that changed everything. This is a report against Captain Rick Holden for abuse of authority and workplace harassment. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I hit save. The fear didn't disappear, but it finally had a name. They say silence protects you, but silence only protects the one who's hurting you. That thought haunted me the next morning as I parked outside the precinct. The Texas sun was already beating down, the kind of heat that feels personal. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Today wasn't going to be another day of quiet endurance. I walked straight to the evidence room, calm, steady, invisible like always. Except this time, I wasn't collecting case files. I was retrieving my own proof. I'd left small traps weeks ago. A blank form slipped between two sheets, an email carbon copied to a dummy account, a small voice recorder hidden in my vest pocket during briefings. Every word Holden had thrown at me, every demeaning remark, every threat masked as advice, I had recorded. I never wanted to use them, but I knew I'd need them someday. That day had come. When I reached my desk, a brown envelope sat there. No name, no return address. Inside were printouts, screenshots of my texts to Jenna and Detective Moore. Someone new. The blood drained from my face. I scanned the room. Holden was across the bullpen, talking to two sergeants, laughing loudly. His eyes flicked toward me for half a second, cold, knowing. He wanted me to see this. He was reminding me who still held the power. I folded the papers, slipped them into my bag, and walked out to the parking lot without a word. My hands trembled so badly that I dropped my car keys twice. By the time I reached home, I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. I called Detective Moore. He knows, I said, my voice shaking. Good, she replied calmly. That means he's nervous. Keep everything safe. Don't confront him again. We'll start an internal probe, but I'll need written statements and evidence from your end. For the next week, that's all I did. After shifts, I sat in my dimly lit apartment, organizing every file. Audio clips labeled with dates. Emails in folders. Screenshots in sequence. It wasn't glamorous. It was exhausting. I barely ate. The hum of the refrigerator kept me company as I built my case piece by piece, like a survivor rebuilding a crime scene. Sometimes I cried quietly, not because I was weak, but because I was tired of being brave all the time. The turning point came 2 Fridays later. I walked into the precinct to find my name printed on the daily duty sheet, suspended pending investigation. Holden stood nearby, arms folded, pretending to look surprised. Sorry, Daniels. Orders from above, he said, voice dripping with mock sympathy. You know how politics works. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just met his eyes and said, Enjoy your peace while it lasts, Captain. It won't be long. He blinked, thrown off by my tone. For the first time, he saw something in me he hadn't before, calm defiance. I walked out with my badge still on my chest. The hot Dallas air hit my face, and I let it. Because deep down I knew, the storm had finally started, but it wasn't over me anymore. It was over him. That night, I handed my evidence to Detective Moore in person. She listened to every recording, her face tightening. You've got him, Sarah, she said quietly. This is more than harassment. It's abuse of power. And we'll make sure he answers for it. For the first time in months, I slept without fear. They call it a system of justice, but for women like me, it starts as survival. The official inquiry began 2 weeks later. Internal Affairs called me in first. No lawyers. No partners. Just me, Detective Moore, and 2 unfamiliar faces from downtown headquarters. They asked about everything. Dates, places, witnesses. I kept my answers calm, clear, factual. Every time they tried to rush me, I paused, looked them straight in the eyes, and continued at my pace. I'd learned the hard way that confidence sounds a lot like control. After 3 hours of questioning, Moore placed my evidence folder on the table. "Play clip number 7, she said. Holden's voice filled the room, low, arrogant, unfiltered. "You'll never last here, Daniels. You don't get it. This is a man's job. You screw with the chain of command, and you'll regret it." The other officers in the room shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. Another avoided eye contact. I didn't smile. I didn't even breathe. I just watched them listen to what I'd been living through. That night, I drove home feeling lighter, but also exposed. Word travels fast in law enforcement. The looks I got the next morning were colder than ever. Some officers whispered, "Rat," under their breath. Others stayed quiet, but their silence screamed louder. Only a few, 2 women from dispatch, 1 rookie patrolman, offered quiet support. A hand on my shoulder. A coffee cup left on my desk. No words, but enough to remind me I wasn't alone. Still, Holden wasn't backing down. He started appearing everywhere. Leaning against his cruiser when I walked to my car, showing up at my old patrol routes even though he didn't need to be there. Always smirking. Always watching. One night, my apartment doorbell rang around midnight. When I looked through the peephole, no one. Just an envelope taped to the door. Inside, a blank piece of paper with the words, "You'll regret this." No handwriting, no fingerprints. Just the message. I didn't report it right away. Part of me was still afraid they'd think I was exaggerating. Another part of me, the cop part, knew this was his desperation showing. But when I walked into the precinct the next morning, I saw something I didn't expect. Holden being escorted out of the building by 2 IA officers. He didn't resist. He just kept his head high, expression calm. When our eyes met, he smirked again. "You think this is over, Daniels?" he said. "You just made enemies you can't even see." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Because I'd already won something he could never take back, my own voice. The next few weeks were quiet but tense. I was still under review, still suspended, but my phone buzzed constantly. IA follow-ups, victim support calls, even local journalists sniffing around the story. I didn't talk to anyone. Not yet. Instead, I started therapy through the department's counseling unit. The first session felt strange, sitting there, badge on the table, trying to explain how someone could make you doubt your worth without ever laying a hand on you. The therapist said something that stuck with me. Abuse of power isn't just physical, Sarah. It's psychological warfare. You fought it the hardest way, by staying truthful. Weeks later, Moore called. "We're forwarding your case to the district attorney," she said. "We've confirmed retaliation, falsification of records, and multiple code violations. You did it." I didn't cry. I just sat there, the sun setting through my blinds, realizing that I hadn't just survived him. I'd dismantled him. But the hardest part wasn't over yet. Because when a man like Holden falls, he doesn't fall quietly. He drags noise, lies, and chaos with him. And I was about to walk straight through it. Justice doesn't come gently. It drags you through the fire first to see if you really mean it. The news broke before I was ready. A local Dallas station aired a small segment. Senior police officer under investigation for misconduct and retaliation. They didn't use names, but inside the precinct, everyone knew. By noon, my phone buzzed nonstop, reporters, colleagues, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Half were supportive. Half wanted gossip. The department tried to stay quiet, but Holden wasn't. He leaked his own version, told anyone who'd listen that I was unstable, obsessed, that I'd fabricated everything to get ahead. Suddenly, I became the story. Online forums, Facebook pages, anonymous comments calling me a liar, a woman scorned. It's strange how the world treats women who speak up. You're brave until your courage inconveniences someone. Then you're a problem. I stayed silent. Not because I was weak, but because my case was still under review. Detective Moore warned me. "Sarah, let the facts speak. Don't feed the noise." But the noise followed me everywhere. My apartment complex got reporters at the gate. My mom in Austin got phone calls from strangers pretending to be journalists. When I visited the grocery store, people stared. Not everyone recognized me, but rumor travels fast in small Texas neighborhoods. Still, every morning I kept the same ritual: coffee, keys, deep breath, mirror check. I'd whisper, "You didn't start this, but you'll finish it." Then came the hearing. Internal Affairs had finished their report. The DA's office had enough to proceed. I was called to testify in front of the review board. 5 senior officers, 2 civilians, 1 HR representative. Holden sat across the table, flanked by his union lawyer. He looked calm, confident, like the room belonged to him. When I took the stand, he smiled slightly, the same smile he used to give when he thought I was beneath him. The first few questions were routine. Then came his lawyer's cross-examination. Officer Daniels, isn't it true you had disagreements with Captain Holden prior to this? Yes. Would you describe those as professional or personal? Professional. No romantic involvement of any kind? None. He kept pushing, implying jealousy, rejection, emotional instability. Every stereotype they throw at women who dare to challenge power. I didn't flinch. I just answered, steady and clear, until he ran out of angles. Then Moore played one of the recordings, the one from the break room. You think your gender gets you special treatment? Holden's voice echoed. You're a liability, Daniels. One complaint from you, and I'll make sure you disappear from this department. The room went silent. For the first time, Holden's expression cracked. His lawyer whispered something, but he didn't respond. The board chair cleared his throat. That'll be all, Officer Daniels. I walked out of that room with my heart pounding, but not from fear. It was something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. I sat in my car afterward, staring at the steering wheel. Tears came, but quietly. They weren't the kind of tears that come from breaking. They were the kind that come from finally being seen. That night, Moore called. He's been suspended indefinitely, pending termination, she said. The DA's office is considering criminal charges for evidence tampering and harassment. I didn't say anything at first. The words didn't feel real yet. You did this, she added softly. You fought back the right way. I looked around my small apartment, the same one that had once felt like a cage. Now it felt like a beginning. But deep down, I knew this fight had changed me forever. I'd won, but I'd never be the same woman who first walked into that precinct, believing the system would protect her. Now I knew better. They say time heals everything. But sometimes it doesn't heal, it reveals. 3 months passed before the department called me back in. The investigation was officially closed, and the outcome was clear. Captain Rick Holden, terminated, stripped of badge and pension, pending state review. I stared at the email for a long time. There was no joy, no celebration. Just quiet justice. When you've been fighting for so long, victory doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with silence, the kind that lets you finally exhale. But silence also brings echoes. Everywhere I went, I could feel the aftershock of what I'd done. Some colleagues wouldn't meet my eyes. Others gave a polite nod, the kind that says, "We respect you, but we're keeping our distance." There were still whispers. Still people saying, she ruined his career. No one talked about how he tried to ruin mine. On my first day back, I walked through the precinct doors and felt like a stranger in my own skin. My desk was clean, my nameplate polished, but something about the air had changed. The new captain, a woman named Lieutenant Perez, greeted me with a firm handshake. "I read your file, Officer Daniels," she said. "Takes guts to do what you did. You've got my respect." That meant more than any commendation I'd ever received. For a moment, I thought maybe things were turning. That maybe women wouldn't have to whisper about survival anymore. But the system doesn't change overnight. One afternoon, I was called to testify again. Not for my case, but for another officer, a young woman who'd come forward about her own harassment. When I met her, she looked terrified, pale, fidgeting with her badge, the same way I used to. "You're Sarah Daniels?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I smiled. "You're not alone. Not anymore." Her eyes welled up, and I knew right then, that's why I'd survived. Not just to win my case, but to be the voice someone else could hold on to. Still, Holden's shadow lingered. He appealed the decision, filed complaints, tried to smear my name again through online forums. But this time I didn't flinch. Because now I had allies, Detective Moore, Captain Perez, and others who'd seen enough to stop pretending. I kept every document, every proof. I even sent copies to the DA's office before he could try anything. When his lawyer sent a notice claiming unlawful defamation, I handed it straight to my attorney with one sentence. Handle it. And they did. Efficiently. Professionally. Legally. Months later, I got a message from Moore. Case closed. Appeal denied. He's done. I sat in the precinct parking lot again, the same place where all this started, and finally smiled. For the first time in almost a year, I didn't feel like I was fighting for survival. I was standing on solid ground. That night, I went for a walk downtown. The city was quiet, the lights reflecting off the wet pavement. I passed by the diner where I'd met Jenna months ago. I texted her. "It's over." She replied instantly. No, it's beginning. And she was right, because justice wasn't the end of my story. It was the start of a new one. The next morning, I submitted my transfer request to Internal Affairs. I didn't want revenge. I wanted reform. I wanted to be part of the team that made sure no one else would have to hide their pain behind silence. When I signed that form, my hand didn't shake. I wasn't the same officer who once walked into Holden's office begging to be believed. I was the woman who made the system listen. They tell you to move on, but they never tell you how. They never tell you that healing feels like learning to walk again, on ground you once feared. By the time my transfer was approved, the seasons had shifted. Dallas was warming up again, and so was I. Internal Affairs felt different from patrol. The noise of radios and sirens was replaced by the quiet hum of printers and the steady rhythm of typing. But behind that calm was purpose. Real purpose. My first day, Detective Moore handed me a thick file and said, "Start here. It's a harassment complaint. You'll know what to look for." I opened the file and saw a familiar pattern. Late shift assignments, missing records, hostile messages. It was like reading a ghost version of my own story. But this time, I wasn't the victim. I was the investigator. Each day, I met women, and a few men, who'd been made to feel small. Each story carried the same undertone of disbelief, the same quiet ache of, "No one will believe me." I didn't promise them justice. I promised them effort. The kind of effort I'd fought so hard to receive. Late at night, when the office emptied, I'd look out the window at the city lights and think about how close I came to giving up. Sometimes I'd whisper to myself, "You made it through the fire. Don't forget what it felt like." But healing wasn't linear. There were still nights when I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, thinking I heard his voice again. Still moments when walking into the locker room made my chest tighten. So I started running, literally. Every morning before sunrise, I'd jog around White Rock Lake. No headphones, no distractions, just breath and pavement. With every step, I let go a little more. The anger, the humiliation, the fear. They didn't disappear. They just stopped controlling me. Then, one morning, I ran into someone unexpected. Holden's former deputy, Officer Mills. He slowed his jog beside me, awkward smile on his face. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "Guess life's full of surprises," I replied. He hesitated, then said, "For what it's worth, I should have spoken up. We all saw what he was doing. We just didn't want to lose our jobs." I looked at him for a long moment. "You can't change what you didn't do," I said quietly. "But you can change what you do next." He nodded, eyes lowered. That was enough. I wasn't looking for apologies anymore. Later that week, I was invited to speak at the department's annual leadership workshop. They wanted me to talk about integrity in command. Standing on that stage, in front of uniforms and badges, I felt a flicker of fear, the old kind. But when I started speaking, it melted away. "Power isn't about rank," I said. "It's about responsibility. The badge doesn't make you untouchable. It makes you accountable." For a moment, the room was silent. Then, one by one, they started clapping. Not out of pity, out of respect. That night, I walked home with a feeling I hadn't known in years, peace. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need approval. I had my voice back. And this time, I was going to use it, not to fight for myself, but for every woman who still whispered her pain in the dark. They say strength is loud, but real strength is quiet. It's the kind that shows up after the battle, when no one's watching. A year passed. One whole year since the night I sat alone at my kitchen table, shaking, starting that first report. Dallas had moved on. The headlines faded. Holden's name became a rumor, whispered but never spoken aloud. He'd left the state after the DA's ruling. Last I heard, he was somewhere in Arizona, working private security. Me? I stayed. I didn't leave the department, didn't switch careers, didn't let fear rewrite my life. Instead, I built something stronger out of the ruins. I'd helped train 3 new recruits, 2 men, 1 woman. The woman, Officer Bennett, reminded me of myself, determined, restless, and quietly brave. One evening, after her first week, she came by my desk. "Ma'am," she said shyly, "how did you keep going when everything felt impossible?" I smiled. "I stopped trying to be unbreakable," I told her. "I just refused to stay broken." Her eyes softened, and I saw it, that spark I once lost but found again. That's the thing no one tells you about surviving. You don't come out the same, but you come out honest. When I got home that night, I opened the small wooden box on my bookshelf. Inside were all the things I'd kept from that time. The old flash drive, printed emails, the IA report, even the blank threat note. For a moment, I just looked at it all. Then, one by one, I started shredding the papers. Not out of denial, but release. Because holding on to proof had once kept me safe. Now, I didn't need it anymore. Justice wasn't something I needed to prove. It was something I'd already lived. A few weeks later, the city recognized me with a quiet commendation for exemplary conduct in upholding ethical integrity and departmental reform. No media, no spotlight. Just a folded letter and a handshake from the chief. That was enough. After the ceremony, I walked out to the parking lot. The evening air was warm, the sky streaked with orange and gold. I sat on the hood of my car, closed my eyes, and let myself breathe. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying a story. I was the story. One that didn't end in pain. One that began there, but grew into something fearless and free. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't always get to choose what breaks you, but you do get to choose who you become after it. And sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is stand up quietly and keep living her truth. I locked my car, looked up at the fading sun, and whispered to myself. He used his badge like a shield, but I turned it into his downfall. And this time, it didn't hurt to say it. It felt like closure.